What a wonderful panel it was, before this. A lot of important takeaways from that panel. And we equally have an interesting topic, we're just chatting in the speaker lounge and, you know, before Nitin came in. We've seen that we say that creative agencies won't be the same shape or form that they exist right now, maybe 5 or 3 years down the line. And that also means the talent that is associated with creative agencies will also undergo a lot of change. Bobby, starting with you, I want to understand what does that change look like? How are creative agencies preparing to kind of tackle that change and to address that change?
I think, we've got to redefine what we mean by talent, right? Previously, I think it just meant art director and copywriter. That was the talent. And the talent was to come up with ideas and to be able to craft them visually or through words. That whole thing is changing, right? I think the nature of the creative team is changing, right? You need a data person there. You need not just a planner who is at the heart of things, strategic planner, but also a platform planner, right? You need people, creative people who are digital natives and who have traditional strengths. And you've got to put them all in a blender and freaking press puree, right? The whole thing is, see, how do you build it? You cannot build it by saying, man, how do you create those people, right? Because you're at the cusp where there's traditional talent and there's digital native talent, right? The thing that we found at Havas works for us is we blend the two. Every creative team has digital talent as well as traditional talent. And what we found that both of them infect each other. It's not that the traditional guys become as good as digital, right? But over a period of time, they will. And the digital guys get the understanding of deeper understanding of storytelling, brand, and strategy from these guys. So that's kind of the way forward. I mean, agencies have talked about collaboration for ages. That shit don't work. I mean, you got to create a culture of collaboration, first, before that happens.
Culture of collaboration. And Dheeraj, so the topic, just the app topic that we have, what will it take to build the next gen creative force? And I was just talking about the context in which we're giving, setting up this panel. What is your take on building that next gen talent that is ready to, lap onto, and address the change that will be undergone, Are you preparing your talent to grooming them to address that change?
I think the biggest change needs to be in the culture of the agencies, right? I mean, classically, if you look at advertising agencies, they were built around divas, right? They were built around personalities. That needs to change because today's younger generation doesn't want to come and wait in the wings for 3 years, 7 years, 8 years to get recognized, right? So number one, you got to build a culture, right, where you promote young talent, you empower them, right? The credit is shared. So is growth, so is success, right? So the fundamental work needs to be done in the construct of the culture of the agencies. That needs huge amount of repair. The traditional construct is broken, right? That one person who's at the helm of whoever is gets all the success, right? That doesn't work anymore. So you got to democratize the culture, number one. Second is you open the funnel of the kind of talent you're getting in, right? I mean, last about a decade, agencies haven't been the most lucrative places for people to work because your hiring salaries are poor, your growth is poor, you do not give, in a startup world, you could be 3-year-old, 5-year-old, you could be running the whole startup, right? That empowerment hasn't come in early. So you need to get in, at Burnett, for example, we go to the best of colleges. We go to MICA, we go to IITs, we go to NID, we go to Hindu, Stevens. We are opening the funnel of hiring best talent inside. That's the second. Third is, how do you grow those people, right? Do you have a fast track? Our salaries at par in the industry. I dare say that leadership levels at Leo Burnett, our salaries are as good as marketing companies, right? So we've worked hard to bring that parity. And the fourth one is a continuous learning culture. So at Leo Burnett, we have tie-ups with Harvard for leadership courses. We have tie-up with DNAD for creative courses. We have tie-up with IMT for continuous digital learning, right? And this has to be a continuous you have to invest in these things. So my pitch is that it needs a complete overhaul.
Nitin, you heard Bobby and Dheeraj. What is your take on grooming talent, that can kind of fit into that change environment?
I think Bobby made a very valid point, and somewhere I kind of am in little disagreement with what the other panelists had. So in terms of how do I groom, so I have been fortunate where I was part of mainline agency, and now I'm part of organization which is largely, it evolved like a web development agency, and then they are hardcore digital natives. So I find myself at a crux of design and advertising, if I can say, and to a certain extent technology. Unfortunately, looking at a resource today, you need to understand the backdrop. The backdrop today is that the world has changed, the last couple of years very drastically. So if we look, three major things have changed. The first thing is that our workplace has evolved. We suddenly switched off and went online, virtual, and then we are coming back to offices. The second thing is that there is a major gig economy which has emerged, which means that 1 out of 4 creative professional is working from home. He is a content creator and he is trying to monetize. So he would be working on project or he would be available as a freelancer. And as such, he's not going to ever come back to agency within the confines of a wall and work. The third thing is that with advent of tech and AI, I have an AI which is writing script or making beautiful artwork. So let's look at what are those things that are needed for anybody, any next-gen creative, You have to think of largely somebody who is a little bit of strategy, little bit of planning, little bit of everything, Even as a creative, he has to think of a lot of variables all the time. And he doesn't have to just essentially stick to one particular mix. So apart from saying that you can look for a culture definitely, I think diversity and getting people from wherever they are streaming from is very important. It's completely broken certain silos where you pick up from institute and you get the resource. You kind of inculcate a faculty where you're more dynamic about the entire approach. Any such talent is what I look for. Yeah.
Exactly. The complexity, they have to deal with is another thing altogether, and they have to even be groomed for that. Bobby, one point that was raised, is about learning and reskilling. And Dheeraj said that they have 10% of their budgets, right, Dheeraj, that they, kind of invest. When it comes to reskilling and, nurturing the existing talent, what is the Havas, approach on that?
See, a couple of things, right? I'll just talk about how I think the best thing teaching can happen when people who are working together teach each other, right? When you put disparate teams, right? When the brief goes out, it doesn't just go out to the traditional people or digital team. Whether the brief is traditional or digital, it goes out to everybody, right? Even the creative director teams are one's traditional and one's digital, right? So that's how this thing. And just by the process of working together, right? I will not meet anybody unless the entire team is there. I will not listen to an idea if the data, the person who heads data and this thing, science, is not there, right? So you've got to push it from the top, right? Is that all of you work together, and anybody can have a great idea, right? Even the data guy can, we've won pitches where the data guys had an idea that the creative guys, this thing. So that brings me to the other point, right? I think one of the biggest walls to break down, especially in an agency, is this whole notion of territorialism, right? If this thing, we say, and especially creative guys are guilty of that. I've been there, man, right? I've been there. I'm old school guy. I have gray hair for a reason because I've been around in the business for a freaking long time. I mean, yeah, the business is brutal. I should have had gray hair 20 years back. But, you know, the thing is, you know, when you say the idea can come from anywhere, the way to shape it can come from anywhere, or if you put your idea in the mix, anybody can shape it in a way that makes it better, right? So if you stop people from holding on to their way of looking at the work, right? And say, you know what, it literally, we've got what we call villages, Havas village. It takes a village to grow an idea in today's day and age, because, see, previously when the idea was just a film and print ad and all that, and print ad adaptation in outdoor, right, where you knocked off the body copy and put the same shit out there, was fine, yeah. But today, you know, the way the idea morphs, because you can't photocopy an idea, right? Because at different points in different platforms, it's got to take different shapes. How it transmutes into content, how it transmutes into reels. I mean, what you'll do on reels and what you'll do on TikTok can be ostensibly the same thing, can be quite different, right? Because the way the platform, people behave on those platforms. So you've got to have all those things in. And in the beginning, I think you've got to be a freaking dictator and drive it. People ain't going to be happy about it. Like I said, people aren't happy when they've got an idea and they're all excited. And I say, get lost. If the team's not there. And I'll ask, you know, if a traditional person is presenting, then I ask the digital guy, what do you think the idea? So either you collaborate or, well, you face my tongue. Not a pleasant thing.
Tough choice. So two things, Dheeraj. One, the reskilling and you know, grooming of the existing talent. A little bit insight into that. And second, are these silos still existent? Like when the creative guy thinks that the tech guy cannot, you know, be creative and suggest an idea. Is that listening also happening in the corridors of a creative agency? How has that bit all, you know, evolved over a period of time?
Yeah, I think there is change definitely, right? And I can talk about my agency. I think at Leo Burnett there are no silos, because we've put the incentive structure in a way that if you don't collaborate, you die, right? And the whole culture is that if you're a person who feels that this is mine and this is my personal achievement and I'm happy about it, versus this is something I sparked and 100 people came and built this and I'm proud of this and became big, the latter gets rewarded. The latter, so you build a culture like that. For example, to small thing, when we go to Cannes, right? Everybody who's at Cannes from Leo Burnett, 15 of us, we go to stage if we win it, irrespective of whether you've been part of doing that work or not, because you're part of the agency. It's collective ownership, right? So I think steps like that have made sure that collaboration is there. I think the nature of solutions have become so complex that people now know that you cannot do it yourself, right? So a career person now does need a data guy, does need a strategist, does need a technologist to solve for these problems. And you know, structurally, the job profile of a career person hasn't changed, right? Career folks have always been great problem solvers with some skill to either play with words, copywriters, to play with art directors. Today, even today, you need to solve problems. Just that the palette of what you can play with is so vast, right? You can play with technology, you can play with data, you can play with metaverse, you can play with AI. So your palette has changed, and that's what makes it the best time to be in the business. But as you said, we got to learn continuously. If you feel that you had a grooming of 5 years, 10 years back, and you can kind of subsist basis that, it's too late. I think the rate of obsolescence is 18 months, right? So if you don't have the learning mindset, you don't have a learning culture, people need to become AI, right? If you are an AI, you will do very well.
Nitin, your story, I mean, how are you nurturing talent and grooming them currently?
Okay, I think one of the first thing that happens is that whenever we look at our team, every person is a microcosm, if I can say. One of the first thing we did is we have interchangeable capabilities, if I can say, which is like a creative person for one account can step as a business person for the other. What typically it does is it makes me get into your shoes, somewhere. And it also tells me the limitations and certain things that as creative folks are always the most pampered ones in an agency. And typically they come up with ideas and the ideas are supreme. But we sometimes fail to see what the business side or any other side is also challenged with. So one of the first thing is that we look at solutions where everybody can step into other shoes and look into. I would say one of the key things that we do as a practice is typically update our OS very often. Whenever we're thinking about plans, we think about plan B, plan C. And this is not for a client, that this is option A, B, C. We are working against the background of metaverse and literal channels which don't exist. In future, there might be even more different kind of environments linking influencer to e-commerce, so many things. So we typically try to enable all these thinking and learning together and do away with anything which is a peripheral, if I can say.
Bobby, traditionally, as an outsider, how we have seen creative agencies or creative talent is that you don't need a formal structure or to follow to get into an agency. You can be yourself and, have that symbolism of a sort of personality, that you're creative. But what is the agency structure like when you spot talent? I mean, do you prefer a formal background, or you can also somebody with this kind of an appeal can make into a creative talent? I mean, does that structure also, exist?
I think you've got to create it, right? A couple of years back, we started this program called Sparks. This is the second year of that. 21 kids graduated out of that. We picked them out. We actually look for bright people across different schools, right? Both in Delhi and Bombay, right? And across disciplines. And those kids, again, they spread across different companies that we have. But because, we believe in this together philosophy, right? And all the companies sit together, they also mingle with each other. And there's a language, skills exchange program between the kids themselves, right? And each kid is assigned a mentor. It's not just the kid who gets evaluated, the mentor gets evaluated on how well the kid has done. I think, when we talk about getting fresh blood in, we need to have skin in the game, right? And the skin in the game is not just opening your door to fresh talent and getting more interns in, but having people with certain levels of expertise and the desire to teach, giving them the time and the space to do that, right? Because you want people to have a real learning, a great learning experience, so that they not only come back to the industry, but they also go and talk to their friends. Man, I learned so much and I had a great time, right? And that's the thing. Again, I think, youngsters today are not limited by the silos that we grew up in, right? And if you see the world, like we operate as a village, right? Therefore, the media guys come hang out with the creative guys. There's no this thing. Right? It's become that over a period of time. Even when the media agency doesn't handle the business, we've got access to the talent, the data, the creative people do, right? And that's because Rana and I run across the group, and our mission is to make that happen. So Showbiz jumps in, whoever jumps in, right? We briefed people from Showbiz and Think Design, which is a UI, UX company, on creative campaigns. But, the expectation on them, but for them, it becomes an interesting thing.
Collaboration.
Exactly.
Of course.
And the youngsters, they're enthusiastic. It's that flame burns bright. It's our job to put the oil in so that it continues to burn bright longer. Otherwise, it gets snuffed and they'll walk away.
Dheeraj, give me a sense of that non-formal entry into a creative agency. How open are creative agencies, leading creative agencies to it, and how do you kind of rationalize that and ensure that it keeps up with the standard that you follow?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, make no mistake, the quality of talent and what agencies make happen is very, very high caliber, right? This is the industry which has built huge amount of shareholder value across brands. People like Bobby sit across global CEOs and solve big problems. I mean, some of the successful people in the business could be successful anywhere else. I dare say that, right? So it's a very high caliber, high demand business, right? I mean, this is the only industry which builds something from nothing, right? And therefore, the need for intake of high quality talent is high as well. So at Leo Burnett, we call that profile mutant DNA, right? So you're good at, say, art, but you're also very good at UX UI. You're good at strategy, but you're very good at data. You are good at business management, but you're also very, very creative, right? And so we have a formal structure where, as I said, we are hiring from IITs, NIDs, MICA, Symbiosis, Hindu, Stevens, LSR, Ashoka, and so on and so forth. So a very strong formal funnel approach to getting young talent in. But at the same time, we're always open to lateral entries, right? So we have somebody who's an aerospace engineer on the floor. We have somebody who's a producer and a video guy who's on the floor. So these profiles keep coming in. We are always open to meeting them, getting them on board and growing them, right? But I mean, it's like some time back I was being frisked at the airport and the cop asked me, what do you do? And I said, advertising. So he said, do you really need any qualification to be in advertising? Or you can just walk in. I can assure it's not that easy.
Yeah. Of course, I think then once, I mean, you have to filter out, you have to have the right talent that adds to the existing pool. Nitin, how do you deal with this lateral, talent that makes an entry?
I think what typically we have to understand that right now everybody has to think horizontal. So if we have lateral, we make sure, like what people were saying while we were hiring or while we are recruiting, we make sure that there is a person who has multi-faceted talent. And otherwise, we also have a program where we give a mentor, where he's given a certain training and program so that he can imbibe and become what he's supposed to. Yeah, yeah.
So we have around 2 minutes. So closing remarks, Bobby, starting with you. So what is your advice, what's your suggestion to people watching us? A lot of creative guys out there, it's also being live streamed. How do we build that next gen creative force and from now on?
As a creative guy, you have your strengths, right? Even when you're starting out, to a certain degree, or you think to a certain degree what you can do well, right? My first thing is, and you're comfortable in that. The only piece of advice I'll give you, and one that served me very, very well, is make yourself uncomfortable every single day. Do something you're not good at, right? You will fail. Without a doubt, in the beginning, your efforts will be marked by more failure than success. But you will learn from the doing of it, right? Nobody ever learns how to ride a bicycle without skinning their knees, right? Anybody who tells you they did that is a freaking liar, okay? The other thing I'd say, I'll borrow from popular culture, the kids really talk about it, right? Hey, I'm gender fluid. It's be skills fluid, right? You will have a strength, but you'll have other interests as well. Those interests, right, can become your side hustle that can add to your arsenal of talent, right? The other thing is live your freaking life outside and online. Live out beyond the algorithm of your cultural programming as well as the algorithm of Facebook and this thing. Deliberately seek out things that you do not probably subscribe to, because that's how you broaden your horizons, right? The best creative people in the world are not necessarily the most talented. They are the most open-minded, and they are the hungriest people you will ever meet.
Wonderful. I like a skill fluidity. That was wonderful. Dheeraj?
I would say, I will start by saying this is the best time to be in the business, right? Because of the palette of what you can play with. You can play with technology, data, product, everything. So best time to be in business. But I also say that change begins at home, right? So all of us are responsible to create the culture, to build the culture that perhaps we didn't have while we were growing up, to build the culture that we want us and our people to live in. And everybody has that influence, and therefore look at ourselves, look at the culture, and build that change in every day, because we do need to evolve, right? I mean, the only way to know the future is by creating it.
Hi, I think I totally agree with Bobby here. I just want to say that we have to, if you're looking at next gen creative force, we need to become divergent. We need to look at any problem and think of multiple solutions that can exist. And it's not about a creative or a media mix, it's about finding a fundamental solution to something. If we have that mindset, probably we are ready for the next gen. I think that's largely my thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say one thing, right? To youngsters, expect more from your leaders, right? They shouldn't just preach. A lot of them will just talk about a good game, but hey, you know what, you need to be future, and they'll stick to their own things, right? People need to do over the last couple of years, I haven't written a single film. I've written 400 social posts. You just got to do that, right? If you expect people to do it, you got to live it yourself first.
So I am taking a risk, and though we are times is up, but there's this gentleman who has a quick question, just like we have 30 seconds to question and answer on. Yes, please. You can just.
So, first of all, it's an honor to be in the same room as all of you distinguished gentlemen.
No, man, my wife would disagree, but hey.
I would just want to begin by offline. So I would just want to, like, before I ask quickly, I would just like to fill everyone in on the room on Nitin. I've had the pleasure of, working at Lintas with him, and I really mean it when I say he's actually the Rahul Dravid of advertising, and I think it's about time that there was an award which was created for recognizing the understated talents of the advertising industry. I owe a lot to this gentleman. But coming now to the questions, I have two questions. One is for Mr. Dheeraj and one is for Mr. Nitin. So Nitin,
We have 2 minutes, quickly, yeah, just 2 minutes.
for sure. I'll do this in F1 speed. Number one, Nitin, it's a world where the client servicing people probably even today don't get their due. Why do you think that is? And my question to Mr. Dheeraj, and I hold you in great, great regard. I have heard so much about you. My question to you is that it's a really high stress oriented industry, if that's the way to put it. How do you feel the advertising industries today, and especially in our country, is taking care of people and just warming up to them? Because at the end of the day, it's just boils down to pandering to the client's request. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for the question. I'll answer the first part. I don't feel that there is any need for somebody to say that when will somebody get the due. I think in advertising, anybody who's passionate about idea, they get their due. It might take some time or some kind of duration. Dheeraj, you want to answer the second part?
Yeah, I think, I mean, of course, it's a high stress business because, you're creating all the time. You don't switch off, right? But I also feel every other business is high stress. I mean, I have friends in startups, that's high stress. I have friends in finance, that's high stress, right? I am yet to come. I mean, my wife was at Mahindra, she's now with Cipla, that's high stress, right? So I haven't come across anything which is easy, right? So we are high stress. What I have learned is that when this joy of creating something, right? When you're being proactive, right? You have a relationship with a client where it's about co-ownership, you're creating stuff, then there's no stress. People don't mind working hard, right? But they mind if it is not fruitful. They mind if it is, going round and round in circles. That's what creates stress, right? People want to work. People are okay working hard as far as there are fruits to what you're creating. So what we try to do is we want to focus on the great work that we want to build, right? If there's great work being created, that takes the stress away, right? I mean, otherwise, from a perspective, are you resourced right? You have the right talent? Are you getting paid correctly on the business? All of that, and therefore we've worked hard to run advertising as a business, right? That is not ad hoc. If the client is not paying enough, I'm sorry, you'll not get the service, right? So we put those checks and balances so that the resourcing, the functional is taken care of. But finally, my learning is that when you're building something great, when you're building something awesome, there is joy. But when you're building something nobody cares about, then that's stressful.
Bobby, you want to add to it? And close
Yeah, just one thing, right? I think sometimes we have, bizarre expectation from work, right? Work is kind of like life. Most of it's boring or painful. It's punctuated by moments of joy. It's those moments of joy that make all of your life interesting. Right? So that's what, work towards those hits of dopamine, big or small, man. They'll carry you through.
Thank you so much. Can I have a round of applause for the panelists? And I wish we had more time. There were people raising their hands, but maybe we can have an offline discussion. But thanks, Bobby, and thanks, Dheeraj and Nitin, for this conversation.